So these are slip casted. I don't know if that's the right phrase. These are stone casting, not slip casting clay. Very kind of similar process though. The material is called stone cast. It's a sort of like concrete aggregate, basically. Sort of concrete meets plaster, I guess is the best way to describe it. And what I did, excuse me, is grab some of these molds. I don't know if you can see that. Let's bring that down here. And so I've just been experimenting with very small molds, you know, and different consistencies. Now, this stuff comes in a powder form like plaster, and you mix it up. 1 part water to 2 parts of the aggregate itself, of the stone cast material itself. And what I found was that these are the first ones. What I found is that you get, I don't know if you can see that. There were a few bubbles, but you know, there's a little bit of finishing that was required on this. This is untreated. This is just how it came out of the actual unit, out of the mold itself. And there's some bubbles in there because some of the bubbles were in the mix because I poured it like you would pour resin from, or like the rubber, which actually introduced bubbles with this rather than reducing them. So there's a method of pouring rubber where you pour the rubber into the mold, but you hold the thing that you're pouring out very high, so you create you pour from a height, basically. You know, like you see like in Egyptian coffee or tea pourers, like or Indian tea pourers that pour coffee from a great height. You know, it's kind of like that. You stretch the thing out so the bubbles evaporate before they actually get in, and that works really well for the molds. However, it doesn't work for plaster, which I should have known because I've worked with plaster before, and the stone cast material, so I actually introduced some bubbles, which is not good. But what you can do is fix this afterwards. And so, you know, there's another one here. I have to excuse because these are literally just tests. So these, I put some magnets on the back just to see like how strong I need the magnets, and they turn out really good, and I really like the finish of them as well. I'm going to do some tests, put these out in the garden and see how well they fare out in untreated in the garden, and then I'm going to do some experiments with finishing these materials off, like putting some kind of sealant on here. I've got to figure out what to do. But back to it. So here are some variations on a theme, basically. Both of these were done with a mixture which was less than 2 to 1. So I had this was a 1 to 1 mix, 1 water, 1 of the aggregate, and this is 1 to 1.5, so 1 water, 1 aggregate. And I found that actually increasing the fluidity, or the you know, it's very sort of viscous when you use the recommended mix. Maybe the bubbles weren't leaving properly, so I thought, you know, I'll make it, it's going to increase the drying time, but I'll try using a little bit more water. And they worked really well, I think. Well, I think they did work very well. I think the 1 to 1 wasn't very good because what actually happened was that the water actually separated from the aggregate in a very weird way, almost like oil and water, and it's taken a very long time to dry. In fact, this still isn't dry. So it's literally taken twice as long, and it doesn't, I think eventually it's a little bit, it's not quite as strong. So there's pluses and minuses. You know, the 1.5 actually turned out pretty good. Very less bubbles, and I'm actually very happy with that. And then what I did another one here because I had a little bit left over. So the way that I did it, I literally poured the water into the mold, poured the water out of the mold into a mixing jug, and that gave me the basis of what I had. I know the weight of the mixing jug. I put it on some scales, I poured in the aggregate, mixed it up, and we went from there. So it's a very simple process, but yeah. So They hold the detail really well. These rubber mold things work out really good. It means that I can make these pretty fast. I don't know how many. The Everything has like a handling lifetime, doesn't it? So I don't know how long these molds will last for how many pieces. It's suggested you can probably get like 100 pieces out of one mold, maybe more, which is quite interesting. But obviously the positives of these are 3D printed, so those are somewhere safe. So at some point I can just remake the molds. That's the beauty of digital. And yeah, these turn out really well. It does push up the cost in weird ways, and I need to sit down and actually work out the cost properly, because it's not simple. So you make the positive mold, you make the let me get it. So you make the original. So this is the original plastic that I made the mold from, and I cast the mold from, and this is 3D printed. So you have to make that. So that's your initial cost. And this rubber actually isn't that cheap. It's you know, it's as I say, I need to actually sit down and work out the actual prices of it, but it's not cheap. All in all this material that I have here, which is just a sample pack, cost me about 15 quid. So that's £15 worth right there, which is basically half a bottle of resin. And you can imagine that this doesn't use half a bottle of resin at all to print on the 3D printer, but it's also a time thing. So there's a lot of variables I need to sit down and work out. You know, a time factor. I can produce a whole bunch of these at the same time, and they will take about they usually take about 3 to 4 hours to print on the printer, because we do print them a little bit slower in Sunlu white. Well, in Sunlu white's really good. It prints fairly fast, actually. The detail's probably not as good as some of the other products, like the Frozen. The Frozen's really sharp, but it's got a really nice finish. And as a product in itself, I much prefer the sort of matte or the semi-gloss, the semi-matte finish that this material presents itself. So yeah, plastic printing, you know, there's a finite cost. I know how much the resin costs. I know how long it takes to print on the printer. How much of my time, like I don't really need to do too much cleaning up with this process, and it's just printed, it's done. So it's, you know, it's relatively cheap. However, once I've made the mold, and this stuff is relatively cheap. The Stonecast stuff is relatively cheap, and it also has a really nice finish. I think because the resin needs to be treated before sending out, so you're going to have to paint it anyway, whether you paint it with colors or you just varnish it. You have to protect it from UV, because the thing with the resin is that it cures in a UV light, which means that over time UV light is going to destroy this. This is not like a lifetime product. Plus it's plastic. There are recyclable plastics, there are options, you know, but it's a very, very small market. It's still basically oil-based resin, whereas this is just stone. There are elements in here. Some of the stone casting stuff have nylon fibers, or they have carbon fibers, or a mix of aggregate. But it's a there's a range of things that you can do, and you know, it's a question of environmentally friendly. Ultimately, though, what I'm thinking is that I can produce perhaps a limited run of Frank and of maybe Lucia as well, and if I print them out correctly on the 3D printer, I can print them up ready to be turned into a mold. So they can already have the flashing and the pore holes and the bits and pieces ready to go, and I can produce like a slab where I can produce a whole bunch of these at the same time. Because the beauty with resin printing is when you're printing a level, it doesn't, you know, printing one of these and printing all of them at the same time takes the same amount of time. Yes, it uses more resin, but if it's doing one layer at a time, it doesn't it doesn't matter if it's just doing one or if it's doing all of them. And that's kind of the same thing with the casting. If I have a bunch of molds that are made ready to go, where I'm doing 5 or 10 at a time, and I just pour the aggregate in them, let them dry, and ship them out, it's a much cheaper process. So there's experiments, right? I need to figure out, because I need to know the cost effectiveness and how much to charge for this sort of thing. So whereas something like this would be, you know, in real terms, accounting for having to pay VAT, having to pay company tax and all that kind of shit, you're looking at, for a print on demand piece like this, you're looking at you're looking at about 15 quid to make it a profitable endeavor, realistically. Whereas this, you could probably get it down to about £10. This is what I would imagine. So in the long run, this will be cheaper. And I think the other, but again, it depends on how these things are presented. I prefer the finish of this. God, I really like the stone. It's got nice weight. You can put paperweight. You have to use more magnets on this, whereas I only need one on here. It's got it's a lovely finish, but maybe some people want plastic, you know. It depends. Like, if the molds are already done, this is much quicker to produce. Relatively speaking, all takes much of a muchness. Like, this would take 4 to, let's say, 5 hours for a nice round figure to actually print, and then you need to wash and clean it and prep it. You need to cure it. So just for the sake of arguments, let's say 5 hours. And if you imagine this is my build plate, then I can make 8 to 10 of these in one go. But I have to have 8 or 10 orders, so I have to do them in batches to make that cost effective. But the same with this. This takes probably takes about only takes a few hours to cure, so you can actually take it out of the actual the mold itself. But to properly try and cure, I haven't tried sticking them in the oven yet and seeing how that goes, but it does that. You know, ideally I need to leave them a day just to air dry and be ready, and then it's going to cost more to ship this than this, because this is heavier than this, but it definitely feels a bit more premium. And it's also got me thinking about making other products as well, because once the molds are made and in other materials, I could do this, maybe not in Stonecast, but I could do it in concrete, I could do it in plaster, I can do like different materials which are more environmentally friendly, which makes the whole thing a bit better. And maybe the stone, I think the stone untreated or even treated will last longer than the plastic will. It's all things to consider. Like, if I'm doing something premium, like a face scan or something, and I'm going to mount that, is that a does it seem more premium in stone, or does it seem more premium in plastic? I would say like a stone piece, a plaster piece, like a statue feels better. Yeah, it's lovely. It's got a beautiful feel to it as well. It's just, there's something really nice about, it's not like plaster. It's really hard to describe the texture of it, because it's stone. It is literally stone. You've cast the stone, and it's got a great weight to it. The feel is really nice, and this is untreated. You can put wax on this and treat that, and it's just relatively done. But yeah, I'm rambling because I'm just letting you know sort of where I'm at and what I'm thinking, and definitely more to do. I'm looking at him now. It looks a bit like sort of like a beat up Batman, doesn't he? He's got a very Batman sort of chin. Anyway, yeah, Okay, that's it. That's it. I've used up 14 minutes or 15 minutes of your time already, so I'll chat to you guys later. But this is good stuff.